The wealthy man disguised himself as a taxi driver to find out where his wife was going. What he saw. Mona Weasley had high hopes for this trip. She really needed a job, and one that paid well. That's why, on the advice of her neighbor, she decided to apply at the factory. They paid well there due to the hazardous nature of the work involving serious chemicals. Her mother tried to dissuade her, suggesting she find something else, but Mona stood firm. Besides, the factory provided accommodation, a room in the dormitory for out-of-town workers. The bus to the city departed at 6:30 in the morning. Mona was already at the station by 6:20. The sun hid behind gray clouds that threatened rain. Mona was nervous. She had never been away from the village for long, especially not to work in the city, far from her home, her familiar life in a small settlement near the forest and a quiet lake. But she had no choice. Money was desperately needed, now more than ever. On the way, Mona thought about the wait ahead. Her shift started at 12, but she would be in the city by 9. Under different circumstances, she might have wandered the streets, observed city life, but not now. She was in no mood. The bus stopped abruptly. Mona nearly fell from her seat. "Hey, Jim. You're not hauling firewood," she shouted to the driver. She had known this guy since childhood. They had grown up together in the village. Mona felt Jim had a crush on her, but she had never been interested in him. "Mona, why did you head to the city?" the bus driver asked with a laugh. "For business, Jimmy. If it pans out, I'll bring you a popsicle." Mona stuck out her tongue and lightly jumped off the steps. In childhood, Jim loved popsicles, ready to spend all his pocket money on them, which was always very little. A good guy, this Jimmy, he had often come to Mona's aid, whom she considered a good friend, though he hoped for more, even now, when she turned 18 and he was 21, and they were no longer children. Mona threw her old sports bag over her shoulder and stared at the note with the address of where she needed to go. Her stomach growled, and the smell of cinnamon rolls and chocolate donuts wafting from the bakery not far from the bus station made her head spin. "No, I can't stand this. I can't just walk past," Mona muttered to herself and headed towards the bakery with an inviting sign that read, "Baked goods for every taste." Mona pulled the door open and bumped into a pretty young woman with short blonde hair and a nose ring. "Oh, sorry," she smiled, clutching her paper bag of purchases. "No, it's my fault," Mona smiled back and stepped aside to let the blonde pass. "Are you working here?" she suddenly asked. Yeah, actually I'm planning to start at the chemical plant today. I hope they'll accept me." The chemical plant, the woman was surprised. "Why would you want that? You're so young, so stunningly beautiful." Mona remained silent. This blonde with a nose ring was rather strange. "Wouldn't you rather try yourself as a model?" "What? Who would need me? I'm from the village, just finished high school." "From the village? And you really need money, right?" "Yeah. But how? There's a reason you decided to work at a chemical plant. Not everyone would dare. Especially at 18. Or are you not yet 18? "I am." "Great. Let's go. Let's sit in the park, eat some pastries," the strange blonde suggested. "My name's Jennifer, but you can just call me Jen." The park was quiet. Only birds chirped to each other in the trees. The sun peeked out shyly from behind the clouds and played in Mona's chestnut hair, making it shiny like milk chocolate. "I can't just sit back and watch this," Jennifer exclaimed, throwing her bag onto the bench and bringing her camera, a massive, obviously professional one, up to her eyes. Mona had only seen such cameras in movies. "Would you mind if I take your picture?" "No, go ahead," Mona shrugged and smiled. Her heart raced. She loved being photographed. Since childhood, she had dreamed of being in movies. "Awesome." Jennifer didn't stop clicking. "Now, tilt your head slightly, put your hands behind your head, like this." "Perfect. Mona, this is a masterpiece. Forget the chemical plant. You could easily earn twice as much at our agency. What agency? Mona didn't understand. Don't get me wrong, the photographer laughed. A modeling agency, a big, well-established one. I'm looking for a new model. Arshana went on maternity leave. Interested in collaborating? But what about the plant? They provide housing. Forget about your plant. I'm telling you, you'll earn more without any health risks. And I'll help with housing. You can stay with me for now, and we'll see what happens next. I live alone anyway. So, what do you say? I just don't want to be kicked out in 3 days. I need a long-term job, you know? Money is really. That's why I'm offering you long-term. Don't doubt it, neither of us will be without work. Jennifer held out her hand. Deal? Mona slapped her hand and chuckled softly. Now, let's get some pastries, Jennifer said eagerly and flopped down on the bench. Mona followed suit. The pastries were absolutely amazing. Everything seemed unreal to Mona. She had come to work at a hazardous plant, and here was this offer, her dream suddenly becoming a reality. Let's go see Mary now. She'll turn you into a treat. We're going to have a busy day today. Are you ready, Mona? I'm ready. You can only dream of a job like this. I've wanted to be an actress since I was a child, but life had its own plans. The newly minted model smiled sadly. You're incredibly photogenic. I've never met anyone like you. Jennifer leaned into the display of her camera. Just a marvel. Why didn't I find you earlier? The day turned out to be really tough. By evening, both women were exhausted. Do you mind sleeping in the living room? Jennifer asked, kicking off her sneakers. I really don't care, as long as it doesn't drip from above and it's not cold from below. Mona hung her lightweight jacket on the hanger. You've got a great sense of humor, girl. I love that. Driven and funny. Before bed, Mona wrote to her mother that she had settled in well and that it wasn't a chemical plant. She promised to tell her more later. The owner of the advertising agency called Business Rep was Dylan Gill. He had recently turned 27 and had already achieved such success in life. Everyone in the company speculated that the boss only lacked a pretty wife who would make his life even better. There were even rumors about something between him and that model who had recently gone on maternity leave. But those were just rumors. Mona met the boss at the corporate party held in honor of the company's 5th anniversary. She had been working as a model for about 2 months, but they hadn't crossed paths until now. Dill, this is our new model, Mona, Jennifer tried to shout over the music. Oh. Why did you hide this beauty from me, Jen? To make your work easier, my dear. Both laughed, and Mona blushed slightly. That corporate party turned Dylan Gill's and Mona Weasley's lives upside down. They danced almost the entire evening, and when Jennifer and Mona returned home late at night, he texted her, saying he was thinking only of her and looking forward to their next meeting. Jen, what can you say about our boss? Mona asked, yawning as they tried to remove their makeup. You're smitten, aren't you? He's a good guy, but so far, as you can see, he hasn't found anyone. Either too closed off or too fickle. I rarely talk to him, Mona. No, not really. It's not like I have a crush. I'm just curious. Mona applied some micellar water onto a cotton pad. He's too old for you, babe, Jen chuckled. He's already 27 and you're only 18. Oh, come on. I'm not planning to date him. I'm not interested in that at all right now. I need to save money. What are you saving for, Mo? Secret? Well, you could say that. I'll tell you sometime later. Nothing illegal. All right, tell me whenever you're ready. Yes, Mona wasn't eager to start a romance with Dylan Gill. It started by itself. You're amazing, Mona, he once said to her when they went to a cafe for coffee. Dill, I'm just an ordinary girl. Mona inhaled the aroma of coffee from her cup. A girl from a village who only finished school, and that's just the basics. I was just lucky that our sweet Jennifer found me and allowed me to live with her. That's right. We should give Jenny a bonus. You know our company has become much more successful since you came on board? Dylan took her hand. No, Mona smiled. I'm glad if that's true. What do you think about us being connected not only by our interesting work, but also by everyday life? He suddenly asked. What? What do you mean, Dill? I mean, to be together. Let's get married, huh? Dylan, are you out of your mind? Where are you, and where am I? Any girl would go for you. Just snap your fingers. I don't need just any girl who's after my money, you know? I want a real one, like you. How do you know I'm real? What if I'm after money too and... Nope. I see right through you. Are you a mind reader? Almost. So, are you up for hunting for money as my wife? Or am I too old for you? No, Dill, you're too young for me. Imagine if you were an old, decrepit man. Then I wouldn't have long to suffer. I'd become a rich widow. All right, I can endure you for 60 years. I agree, Mona looked into his eyes. We'll have a magnificent wedding. Dylan squeezed her hand tightly. Dill, let's skip that, please. Mona took a sip of coffee. Don't like fuss and noise? I don't either. All right, we'll have a quiet wedding. Just for the two of us. Deal? Mona looked at her future husband with gratitude and tenderness. Young Mrs. Gill didn't abandon her career as a model, although her husband suggested she focus on herself and her education. I get it, you just don't want to pay me a salary, Mona giggled as they lay on a new luxurious bed with a mattress that felt like a cloud. Caught me. I wanted to save, but it didn't work out. Dylan kissed his wife on the temple. Actually, Dill, I want to work. Let's boost the company even more. Let clients come running to us for advertising. You know, I was thinking of visiting a childhood friend tomorrow. You okay with that? Then let's visit her together. Dylan pulled his wife closer. No, Dill. Think about it, how are we supposed to gossip then? It'll be a girls' meeting. Come on, don't be mad, okay? All right, I'll believe you this time. Mona returned late. Dylan was almost asleep. Hey, sweetie, why so late? Should I regret letting you visit your girlfriend? No, silly. Sorry. It's just that Mel and I haven't seen each other for so long. She didn't want to let me go. She has some problems there, asked for help. Does she need money? Yeah, Mona quickly pulled on her nightgown and slipped under the blanket. She has some women's problems, probably needs an operation. Besides me, she has no one else who can help. No problem. Friends should help each other. That night, Mona couldn't sleep for a long time. She thought about how drastically her life had changed after meeting Jennifer, that fan of her work with a heavy camera around her neck. Mona marveled at how that delicate neck bore the weight of this giant. But Jen didn't care about anything, ready to shoot anything that seemed incredible to her, and to this blonde with a nose ring, almost everything seemed incredible. Mona wondered if she loved Dylan or just got married to not lose her job. Mona couldn't answer that question. There was a secret in her life that only her mother knew about. And she really needed money, and quickly, the deadlines were pressing. It was hard to drag on any longer. Her visits to her friend became more frequent. Dylan didn't like it. His wife was clearly hiding something, didn't want to introduce him to Mel, hardly told him anything about herself. She only said she grew up in a village not far from the city and that her father left her and her mother when she was 5. He disappeared and never appeared in their lives again. Mona even postponed his meeting with her mother. Let me drive you myself, offered Dill when his wife was going to visit her friend again. Dill, why do you want to drag yourself there? It's far, and Mel is very closed off, plus she's sick. Please, it'll be easier for me too. I promise, I won't be long. And in the evening, I'll bake you your favorite pear pie. She kissed her husband on the lips. As always, he melted from that sweet kiss. What time are you leaving? Should I call a taxi for you? No need. I'll call myself. I'll leave around 2. I still have 3 hours, Dylan thought to himself. Mary, honey, I really need your help. Dylan stood in the doorway of the makeup artist's apartment, who had been working in his company since its inception. What's wrong, Dill? Mary stepped aside so the boss could come in. I'm willing to pay generously for this, Mary, but you have to make me unrecognizable, even to my wife. Dill, do you want to tell me anything? Mary squinted. Not yet. So, will you do it? Well, I suggest turning you into a dark-skinned fat guy. How about that? Perfect. Let's do it. We only have an hour. We'll make it in time. Just need to get to work. So let's go. I'll pay you for this day as if it were a week. Oh, come on, let's go, my generous boss, who has secrets now. Dylan dialed Frank. He had been working as a taxi driver for a long time, and Dill used his services directly. Frank, buddy, I need your help today, he started. Your car, and intercept the order from my address. It's long to explain. Meet in an hour? All right, Dill. I don't know what you're planning, but I'm in, Frank said cheerfully. I'm paying, you know me, Dill pressed the off button. Yeah, our Dill has become a private detective. Isn't it following his wife? I'll tell you later, Mary, everything later, but now let's hurry up. We still have to turn me into an African American. So the guys like to call themselves dark-skinned? Exactly at 2 o'clock, a dark-skinned taxi driver was on the scene. The gates opened, and Mona appeared with 2 bags. Hello, the girl hurriedly threw, climbing into the back seat of the car. Good afternoon. Ready for the trip? Asked Dylan Gill with a deep voice. I'm ready, Mona said tiredly, leaning back in the seat. Where are you rushing off to in this village? The driver chuckled. There, my family lives there. I lived there myself not long ago. But the job search forced me to move to the city. I have a little daughter. She's 4 years old. The car jerked suddenly. Sorry about that, apologized the taxi driver. You're so young, and already a daughter. Yes, I had her early. You could say, right after my final school exam, Mona smiled. I see, the driver croaked hoarsely and didn't say another word. Will you wait for me to go back? Mona asked when the car stopped in front of a rundown house, next to which stood a woman with a little girl in her arms. I'll wait, the taxi driver replied shortly. I won't be long. Mona hurriedly opened the door and slipped outside. Hi, my dears. Mona exclaimed, hugging her mother. They looked alike, so Dylan had no doubt that this was Mona's mom. Mom. The little girl reached out to Mona. Come to me, my honey. Mona took the little girl in her arms and hugged her close. How are you? Her mother asked. Everything's fine. I just need to gather a little more. I told Dylan the money was for a friend. So there's enough for the operation and rehabilitation. Dylan adores me. It's very good. And you? Miss Wesley looked at her daughter. Mom, you know. Let's not talk about it. Right now the most important thing is to cure Daisy. We're lucky that her heart condition is treatable. Sweetheart, but this isn't fair. You should have told your husband everything. Mona turned to the taxi driver and, lowering her voice, said, Mom, who needs a woman with a child, and health problems at that? And what if he refused to hire me? Don't even mention marriage. I'll tell him, I promise. Once our little one has the operation and becomes the healthiest girl in the world, then I can confess everything. Even if Dylan kicks me out, it's already done, and the rest. I'm not that concerned about. Anyway, I need to go back. There are toys, medicine, and groceries in the bags. See you soon. Mona kissed her daughter first, then her mother, and quickly darted towards the car. Was I gone too long? She asked the driver. It's fine. Dylan turned the ignition key. Thoughts churned in his head. Mona had no business with him, she just needed his money. How wrong he was. Yes, she needed the money not for frivolous desires, but for her daughter's treatment, but still. His wife had everything, and she married him solely to save money. Mom was right, Dylan completely misjudged people, he was easily manipulated. Inside him, everything was boiling. He wanted to confront Mona right then and there, to yell at her, to drink until he forgot everything and escape to the ends of the earth. Dylan Gill struggled to get home and, after dropping his wife at the gates, went to return the car to Frankie. You don't look good at all, Frank whistled. Took off my face, took off my gut too, Dylan grinned. I'm not talking about that, buddy. You look like you swallowed a toad, he patted Dylan on the shoulder. I'd rather have swallowed a toad, Frankie, the fake taxi driver sighed. All right, when the time comes, we'll talk over a bottle of beer, Frank got behind the wheel. Where should I drop you off? I don't even know. Say, buddy, are you free right now? Maybe it's time for that beer after all. But I need something stronger today. Got it, then let's go to my place. Barbara and the boys are visiting her aunt tonight. The whole night is ours, bro. Dylan returned home only by morning. Dylan, I called you 100 times. What happened? Mona cried in the hallway. Are you asking me that? Barely moving his tongue, he spoke. You can't stand on your feet. Where did you get so wasted? Go take a shower. Don't tell me what to do. You liar. You've been deceiving me all this time. Your friend is sick. How could you, M.O., how? Dylan, what are you talking about? How did I deceive you? Mona stifled a yawn. Even now, you're lying, looking me straight in the eyes. You're worse than those gold diggers after my money. Get out of my house. You've already saved up for surgery for your daughter, whom you got pregnant with back in school. Slut. Tears burned in her eyes and throat. Mona understood that Dylan was right, but it hurt that he spoke to her like that. Yet she couldn't understand how Dylan found out. Could he have bugged her? And it was so close, just a little more effort, and the operation would have been done. How could she have been so careless? Thoughts jumbled in Mona's head, pushing one another. She didn't know what to say. I'm sorry, Dylan, his wife squeezed out and went upstairs. I'll pack my things and leave. I really didn't want to deceive you. I was so scared. When Mona came downstairs, Dylan was lying on the couch in the living room, fast asleep. She placed the keys on the small table in the hallway and left the house. Mona, her mother, came out onto the porch, seeing a car arrive at her house. What are you doing here? Did you leave your husband? Why do you have a suitcase? Don't worry, Mom. Everything's fine. It's just, tears burst from her eyes. Dylan found out everything, I don't know how, but he found out. He called me a slut and threw me out. My girl, her mom hugged her and held her close. She stroked Mona's hair and cried with her. How's Daisy? Clinging to her mother, Mona asked. She's still sleeping. She had another episode during the night. I gave her the medicine the doctor prescribed. Oh God. What a fool I am. I couldn't finish what I started. There's so little left. What do we do now? The clock is ticking. We can't delay the operation. M.O., I told you. If you had just told Dylan everything from the beginning. From what you've told me, he's a good man, noble. Yes, Mom, but it's not his child. Do you think he'd want to help someone else's girl? No, of course not. He would have kicked me out of his house and probably fired me too. Enough of this. I'll figure something out. Daisy will live a full life, I swear. Mona woke up to her phone ringing incessantly. Hello, she answered sleepily. Mrs. Gill? We can take your daughter today. She'll be operated on very soon. What? But I haven't gathered the full amount yet. Mona was flustered. The amount for the operation and rehabilitation for the girl was transferred to the clinic's account yesterday evening. When should we send the car for you? That's already been paid for as well. We'll be ready in 2 hours. Mona couldn't understand anything at all. She was speaking automatically. Okay. The car will be at the specified address in 2 hours. Mona hung up and stared into space. Who paid for her daughter's treatment? Could it really be Dylan? No, that couldn't be true, especially after how rudely he spoke to her when he came home. Yes, he was very drunk, but his eyes were blazing with anger. Her lie had deeply wounded him. It didn't make sense for this person to pay for Daisy's surgery, a girl who was a stranger to him. Mona decided not to think about it for now. The most important thing was that Daisy would soon be operated on, and she would live a full life, running like other children, sleeping peacefully, breathing evenly. Mona was ready to do anything as long as her little one recovered. The operation day was set. Daisy and Mona had arranged themselves in a cozy room that resembled more a lovely little space in an ordinary home. Daisy, tired from the journey, fell asleep after a brief examination. Mona couldn't find peace, reading was impossible, focusing on anything was difficult, and there was absolutely nothing more to do here. Mona simply lay down on her bed and tried to relax. In the silence, thoughts were unusually active. Mona was thinking about Dylan. Why did he pay for everything at the highest rate, even though he spoke to her with such hatred? Mona decided that when she and her daughter left the hospital, she would definitely return him the money she managed to save. Mona understood that this person was absolutely not obliged to help her child. She was sure he had already filed for divorce. Mona wasn't too worried about it, since what she had been striving for since Daisy's birth was beginning to happen. But suddenly something inside her clenched, as if she couldn't breathe. What was this? Did she really miss Dill, this joker who at the same time was so serious, ready to lend a helping hand in difficult times? He didn't go crazy because of his success and wealth. For Dylan, money was more of a means of existence than an end in itself. He did not consider himself better than others simply because he had his own business that generated a stable good income. And this really appealed to Mona. She suddenly remembered Blake. Why did he come to their village then? Why couldn't his aunt live somewhere else? She was not yet 16 then. Mona wasn't as flirtatious as many other girls in their village, but this city boy literally made her head spin. At first, she refused to even talk to him. But Blake was persistent and behaved differently from the rough and uncouth village boys. Gradually, he began to win Mona Wesley's favor. They started walking together in the evenings. There were few entertainments in the village, so they mostly wandered through the dark streets, where it was so convenient to remain unnoticed and give each other kisses. Sweetie, Lisa, Mona's mother, began at one point, wouldn't you walk with this guy? Blake isn't for you, he's not worth a penny to hurt a young girl. Mom, you're wrong about him. He's very polite, unlike our rough boys from the village. Mona, I'm telling you what I see. You might regret meeting him. I know such types, they look polite and courteous, but in reality. Her mom sighed. Blake left at the end of August. He promised to come back. He said she had stolen his heart, that she was now his woman. Mona, although well-read and developed beyond her years, was still somewhat naive and overly trusting due to rural life. She thought that now, when Blake had become her first man, they would be together forever, that she just needed to wait for him and everything would be wonderful. This young girl knew how to wait. It would probably have been forgotten over time. Mona would eventually realize that Blake simply had a good time with her, that her mother was right, this guy wasn't for her. Yes, it would have been forgotten if Mona hadn't felt strange at the end of September and her critical days refused to come. Had this happened to her? My God, What would they say in their small village, where everyone knew each other? How would she and her mom live here now? Her poor mother. She had warned her. For some reason, it was precisely now that Mona realized Blake would never return, even though he had left just a month ago. Her mom had always been Mona's best friend, so the girl didn't dare hide her pregnancy from her. "Mom, maybe we should go to the city? There are clinics where..." "Don't even think about it," Lisa Wesley said sternly. "You were smart enough to conceive a child, so now be smart enough to give birth to it and raise it." "Mom, I understand I'm guilty, that I behaved like a loose girl, but I just turned 16. And about that, my dear, you should have thought a little earlier, when you were wandering with Blake through dark alleys while I was at work." Mona lowered her eyes. Her mother always condemned abortion, the girl knew that. It was difficult for her to talk about it too. But how to live on now? She had dreamed of escaping this place, going to college, and then bringing her mom to the city. And what awaited her now? A job in the local shop? Almost all the young residents had already left the village, leaving only the elderly and the failures who had nothing and no one to hope for in life, including themselves. Mona had 1 year left in school. She managed to hide her pregnancy quite well, she just had to be excused from physical education. Mona became somewhat unsociable, withdrawn, stopped hanging out with her girlfriends. Right after school, she went home and sat with her books. What a surprise it was for the entire school, and the village as a whole, when in late May a child appeared in the Wesley household. Daisy was born a beauty, everyone who saw her remarked on it. And when she turned 6 months old, city doctors, Mona and her mother took the baby for examination, discovered a heart defect. They were told that an operation was needed before she turned 5. But it was very expensive, and they might not even get the quota. It was better to act on their own and save up the necessary amount. Mona and her mother tried to save, but their meager village wages only covered the bare necessities, and even then, with difficulty. That's why Mona decided to take a trip to the city to get a job at a chemical plant. The young mother was ready to do anything to cure her daughter's ailment. Mother and daughter were her only family in this world, so she was not going to lose them, even if it cost her life. "Dylan, where's Mona?" Jennifer burst into the boss's office, narrowly avoiding hitting her camera on the door frame. Dylan remained silent, his head bowed over his clasped hands. "Dill, this stays between us, I promise. You know me, I'm not a gossip. What happened?" "Jen, why did she do this to me?" He looked up at the photographer. His eyes were red, clearly sleepless for a long time. "Mona? What did she do? I can't believe She's a good person." "Oh yeah? Then why did she hide from me that she has a little daughter, with a heart defect no less? Do you know why she married me?" "No?" "Well, Jen, she did it to get as much money from me as possible for her daughter's operation." "Dill, listen," Jennifer lowered herself onto a chair opposite his desk, "it's maternal instinct. She was just scared for her child's life, you understand? She was afraid you'd leave her, or she'd lose her job. But I love her, and Dill, until Mona gets her daughter treated, her heart won't be open to love. It's just how it is. She's just a really good mom, that's all. I'm sure Mona loves you, otherwise she wouldn't look at you with such tenderness. She's just not allowing herself to think about it right now. Jen, I paid for the operation and their stay in the clinic. I did that. But I kicked Mona out and said a lot of nasty things to her. I was completely drunk, you know? I understand, Dill. Now you can make things right. Do you want me to come with you? We could plan a surprise for when they return from the clinic. Come on, man, make a decision. Jen, has anyone ever told you that you're just an amazing girl? For the first time in days, Dylan Gill smiled. I don't remember, she replied casually, snapping a photo of the boss. What are you doing? I look like a squashed frog. Dylan covered his face with his hands. We've got to prove to Mona that you really suffered, Jennifer chuckled. You, troublemaker, Jen. So, are we going? Can you track when they're coming back? Yeah. Jen, I can handle that. Listen, boss, go get some sleep. You're about as useful at work right now as I am. Or maybe I should photograph you for the new swimsuit ad. What do you say? I think I'll prefer the first option. I'm going home to get some rest. I promise, you'll have a model. The best one. My best model is Mona Weasley Gill, Jennifer sighed. And I feel the same, Dylan winked and stood up. I'm going home. You should too. Think about the surprise while you're at it. Mrs. Gill, the nurse, tried to wake Mona, who had finally managed to fall asleep, lost in thought. Yes? Mona opened her eyes and looked at the nurse in the white coat. What's wrong? Nothing, everything's fine. Daisy's operation is scheduled for tomorrow. Try to stay calm so she can feel as relaxed as possible. And this is for you. She placed a small bouquet of daisies on the bedside table. Thank you. Mona got out of bed. They're so beautiful. All right, I won't disturb you. I'll come back later to give Daisy her medication. Jennifer, Mona whispered. How did she find out? Did she talk to Dylan? As usual, Mona tried to push away the thoughts that troubled her so as not to worry and pass this anxiety onto her daughter. Right now, the most important thing was the operation. God, help her. Help my little Daisy, Mona prayed quietly, sitting on her bed. She had just escorted her to the operating room. The anxious mother paused for a moment, holding her daughter's favorite stuffed kitten in her hands. Forgive me for ever thinking about getting rid of you. Forgive me, I was so foolish, so young. Let my little girl be healthy. Let her heart beat steadily, without interruptions, please. Let my girl live a full life. After this prayer, Mona felt a little lighter, for the first time in all these years, somehow lighter. She felt herself drifting off to sleep. Unconsciously, Mona drifted away. Her sleep was deep and peaceful, without any dreams. Mona woke up when the door to her room opened. She sat up in bed, blinked her eyes, trying to return to reality. Daisy is feeling well. She'll stay in intensive care for a while. She's got a strong constitution, so I think she'll recover quickly, said another nurse. Thank you, Mona whispered quietly. You can breathe out now. The most worrying and frightening part is over. Daisy's health is no longer in danger. The operation was successful. Now, it's only positive emotions. The nurse smiled and left the room. Thank you, Lord, Mona whispered, clutching the stuffed kitten to her chest. You know, I'm ready to discharge you, said the elderly doctor, calling Mona into his office. Do you live in the village? Yes, Mona was slightly nervous. I think you don't even need any special rehabilitation. Especially if there's a small forest. We have a forest, we used to walk there often with Daisy. There's also a beautiful lake. In general, we have a lot of greenery and beautiful places. That's what I'm saying, you don't need any special rehabilitation. Your daughter turned out to be a very strong girl. Now, more positivity and attention. Thank you, Doctor. I'll do everything to make sure Daisy fully recovers. I'll write the recommendations now, and tomorrow morning you can go home. Mona felt incredibly happy as she and her daughter headed home, as if she hadn't been there for 100 years. Stop, please, right here, Mona asked the driver as they turned onto their street. Let's take a little walk to our house. All right, as you wish, he replied. Good luck. They walked slowly down the narrow street. Everything seemed special to Mona. The air was clean, the trees incredibly green, and the sky so blue it was hard to describe. That's how it always feels when the worries that haunted you for years finally retreat. Suddenly, Mona remembered Dylan. How much she missed him, without even realizing it herself until now. Mama! Our house turned into a magic castle. Daisy exclaimed. Mona looked up. Beside their old house stood a large, bright trampoline shaped like a fairy tale castle with a kiddie pool nearby. Balloons and flowers were everywhere. Right in the yard was a set table laden with all sorts of treats. 3 people rushed out of the house: Jennifer, her mom, and Dylan. They started throwing colorful softballs at Mona and Daisy, blowing party horns. "Welcome back," Jennifer shouted, running to hug Mona and Daisy. "My girls. And the daughter is just as beautiful." A feast for the eyes of a photographer. "Dill, I found another model. We can do ads for children's products." Dylan and Lisa approached simultaneously. Mona began to hug everyone in turn, tears streaming down her face, her heart singing with joy. "Are you my dad?" Daisy suddenly asked, raising her head and looking attentively at Dylan. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm your dad. I just didn't know I had such a wonderful daughter before, but now I know, and I came." He picked Daisy up in his arms. "Thank you, Dill," Mona whispered softly, stroking his head. She knew it drove him crazy and brought incredible pleasure. In the evening, Grandma went to put her granddaughter to bed, while Jennifer set off to explore the lake in complete solitude, well, except for her faithful companion hanging around her neck. This girl was first and foremost a photographer, and then a human being. Mona and Dylan sat on the porch, quietly talking. "Dill, I wanted to tell you," Mona began, "that I never intended to deceive you. By the way, I'll give you everything I've saved up. It'll at least partially cover your expenses for Daisy and me." "Mona, stop. It's me who should apologize for the things I said back then. I was so drunk. Thank goodness Frank convinced me to transfer the money to the clinic with a clear head. Forgive me, Mona. I never really believed that you had a daughter out there. You're a great mom. You're a wonderful person. If it weren't for Jen, I'd probably still be sitting in my office, not knowing how to go on." "Dill," Mona laid her head on his shoulder, "how did you find out about everything? About my daughter needing surgery?" Dylan chuckled. "What? Did I ask something wrong? Did I tell you myself? Or was I mumbling in my sleep?" "No, M.O. Do you remember that chubby dark-skinned driver who drove you here and back home?" "Well, I remember. He was a bit odd, seemed nervous." "Well, darling, that odd taxi driver was me," Dylan burst out laughing. It had been a long time since he laughed so heartily. "Oh, come on. How? You were pulling my leg." Mona playfully nudged him in the side. "No, it's all thanks to our Mary. You made Mary transform into that chubby uncle? I can't believe it." "But why, Dill?" "M.O., forgive me, I was jealous. I was afraid you had someone else and decided to keep an eye on you. I couldn't think of anything better than becoming a taxi driver." "Well, Dill, you've outdone yourself. You know, everything happened so fast, first Jen with her camera, then you. I was afraid to tell you about Daisy. Since her birth, I've always been on edge, listening to her breathing at night, and then we got that bad diagnosis. Forgive me, Dill." "There's nothing to forgive, silly. I want you, Daisy, and Layla to come live with us. We'll be a real family." "But..." "What?" Mona tensed. "I think Daisy will be bored, so we urgently need to give her a little brother or sister. Someone once told me that I need to study. And I have photo shoots. M.O., you're strong, I believe in you. You can handle all of this, and I'll help you." Dylan pulled her close, peppering kisses on her face and neck. "Dylan, have you really thought about who you're dealing with? An uneducated girl from a village." "Shoo, I've thought it through." Dylan leaned in to kiss her. "What are you two doing here?" Jennifer suddenly shouted, appearing out of nowhere. "Hurry up to the lake. It's such a magical place. I have to capture this. Let's go, I'll photograph you. The moon, the calm water. Oh my God, Jen." My heart sank to my boots. Dylan said, slightly alarmed. Why yell like that? The village was already asleep, barely any lights were on in the houses. 3 figures slowly walked along the path towards the forest lake. Jennifer's camera led the way, eager to capture the best shots, as it had long yearned to get back to work.